Before we begin, I want to take a moment and thank our monthly members. You help to fuel the enlightening education that benefits many around the world. Your support enables Seek to continue creating content, providing a path for all spiritual seekers. Support us with a monthly membership on YouTube, Patreon, or Ko-Fi at Join Seek, or on Facebook at Join Seek 1. Become a member and you will see your name in future videos. Thank you. What does it mean to seek the divine? Not through belief alone, but through transformation. In the swirling poetry of Rumi, in the chants and dance of the Dervishes, and the silent contemplations of saints, Sufism unfolds as Islam's mystical heart. The word Sufi has long invited speculation. Some trace it to the Arabic term suf, meaning wool, referencing the simple garments worn by early ascetics who rejected worldly luxury. Others connect it to safa, or purity, indicating a refinement of the inner being. Still others point toward the al-Sufa, the companions of the Prophet who lived in poverty and devotion in the earliest Muslim community. Each etymology reveals a dimension of the tradition: austerity, purification, and proximity to sacred presence. From its earliest recognizable forms in the 8th and 9th centuries CE, Sufism emerged within the expanding Islamic world as a response to increasing institutionalization. As empires grew, so too did a need among certain individuals to preserve an immediate and experiential relationship with the divine. The early ascetics of Basra and Kufa, including figures such as Hassan al-Basri, emphasize fear of divine judgment and ethical rigor, and Rabia al-Adawiyya turned away from worldly power to pursue divine love in solitude. Rabia, the saint of early Baghdad, is said to have walked through the streets with a torch in one hand and a bucket of water in the other, declaring she would burn heaven and extinguish hell so that God might be loved for his own sake, not out of fear or desire. This shift from fear to love marks a decisive transformation within the mystical trajectory. By the 10th century CE, Sufism began to develop a more articulated vocabulary. Terms such as maqamat and awal emerged, referring respectively to stations and states. Stations were understood as stages on the path achieved through disciplined effort, such as repentance, patience, trust, and contentment. States, by contrast, were gifts from the divine, transient experiences such as ecstasy, intimacy, awe, or annihilation. This distinction reveals a sophisticated phenomenology of consciousness, one that parallels in striking ways mapped experiences found in other contemplative systems. The concept of fanā, or annihilation of the self, became central. It describes the dissolution of the ego in the presence of the divine reality. This annihilation is followed by baqā, subsistence in God, wherein the individual returns to the world, yet transformed, no longer acting from personal will, but as a vessel of divine expression. One finds here a resonance with the Neoplatonic ascent and return, as articulated in the works of Plotinus, as well as parallels with the Buddhist notion of non-self, called anatta or anatman, and even the initiatory death and rebirth motifs of ancient mystery spiritual systems. The Sufi path, known as the Tariqa, developed as a structured means of transmission. While Islam as a whole is sometimes referred to as the Sharia, the outer law, Sufism came to be understood as the inner path, the haqiqa or truth. Marifa represents the direct gnosis that dawns after disciplined adherence to Sharia and inner refinement through Tariqa, culminating in the realization of haqiqa as the unveiled truth, apprehended not by intellect alone, but by transformed consciousness. In this way, Sufism is not an ism in the sense of most words that carry that linguistic structure. Sufism is not a sect or separate branch, like Sunnism or Shi'ism. It is a spiritual tendency or tariqa, and a practical science that can exist within all. The relationship between these dimensions was not oppositional but hierarchical. The outer forms provided stability and discipline, while the inner path sought realization. Sufis often speak of three concentric circles: Sharia, the outer law; Tariqa, the spiritual path; and Hakika, the ultimate truth. To the uninitiated, these may appear separate. The jurist clings to law, the mystic to experience. But in reality, they form one living continuum. Law provides form, the path gives motion, truth gives light. In symbols, it's body, heart, and soul. The Sufi journey thus exists not in opposition to Islam, but as its flowering, just as fragrance is not apart from the flower. To truly understand Sufism, we must move beyond outer doctrine and into the heart of Tariqa, the path that leads from outward ritual to inner realization. Let's explore how this journey began. Sufism traces its earliest roots to the contemplative companions of the Prophet Muhammad, where figures like Abu Bakr and Ali are remembered in Sufi genealogies as the first links in chains of spiritual transmission known as silsila. The importance of transmission cannot be overstated. The silsila, or chain of initiation, linked each teacher back to the Prophet Muhammad, understood within Sufism not merely as a historical figure, but as the primordial human, the insan al-kamil, or perfect human. The Prophet Muhammad himself is seen as the archetypal Sufi, not by asceticism, but by presence, humility, and the luminous love that pervaded his being. From these origins emerged an ideal that beneath every outward act of worship lay an inward state of remembrance. The perfect human or archetype, called al-insan al-kamil, becomes the bridge between creator and creation, a microcosm containing all divine names embodying the macrocosm. Through love, knowledge, and annihilation, one returns to consciousness of this oneness, the same realization pursued in the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, or the Taoist notion that heaven and earth share one root. This ontological vision opened doorways for integration with Western esoteric and philosophical currents later on. This concept represents the fully realized state in which divine attributes are perfectly reflected within the human form. It functions as both a metaphysical principle and a practical model. Islam, Iman, and Ihsan represent the three ascending levels of Islamic faith. Islam is the outward submission or practice, Iman is the inward faith or belief, and Ihsan is the spiritual excellence or perfection. They define the practical, theological, and spiritual dimensions of a Muslim's relationship with Allah. Ihsan, the third dimension of the prophetic teaching after faith and practice, means to worship God as though you see Him. This gaze, constant, tender, and radiant, is the heart of Sufism. Through this awareness, every act becomes sacred, and the world transforms into a prayer rug. This inner Sharia, the law of love, governs the mystic's life far beyond external commandments. In this sense, the Sufi path is an entheogenic theology of the heart, a continuous inner flowering born of surrender, a perpetual intoxication with the divine real. To live by Ihsan is not to renounce earth, but to sanctify it. Hence, the Sufi's paradoxical motto, the water takes on the color of its container. Love takes whatever form the moment requires, whether compassion, service, solitude, or poetry, and reveals God in each. The Quran's inner meaning, called the batin, became the key to the Sufi worldview. Outwardly, the text commanded worship, fasting, and charity. Inwardly, it spoke of annihilation in God, called fanā fi Allah, and subsistence through Him, called baqā bi Allah. This journey of dying and being reborn within divine consciousness created a map of spiritual realization mirrored across other spiritual systems. The Buddhist escape from rebirth called nirvana, the Taoist concept of wu wei or effortless action leading to transcendence, and the Upanishadic merging of the self called Atman with the ultimate ground of being called Brahman, found in Hindu philosophy. By the 9th and 10th centuries CE, Sufism had crystallized into articulated doctrines and institutional lineages. The famous mystic, al-Hallaj, who cried, Ana al-Haq, I am the truth, was executed in Baghdad for uttering words that blurred the boundary between the human and the divine. Yet, his martyrdom ignited centuries of mystical philosophy, the realization that, in the ultimate state of fanā, there is no separation left to preserve. Through Hallaj, Sufism inherited its paradoxical language, where presence lies in absence, and union is realized through annihilation. From these early visionaries arose a tapestry of brotherhoods, rituals, and teachings that spread from Spain to India. To understand their depth, we must look into the Tariqas, the Sufi orders that help shape the spiritual geography of Islam. The Tariqas emerged between the 11th and 13th centuries CE as both formal institutions and living paths. Each claimed a chain of transmission back to the Prophet, yet their methods differed. The Qadiriyya, founded by Abdul Qadir al-Jilani in Baghdad, emphasized humility and service. The Rifa'iyya became known for their ecstatic rituals involving music, fire, and physical endurance. The Chishtiyya, spreading through India, integrated local devotional traditions, merging Islamic remembrance with Hindu bhakti, focused on love and service. Their shrines became centers of musical devotion, birthplaces of music aimed at inducing spiritual ecstasy called qawwali, where longing and praise collided in sound. Perhaps the most famous of these orders was the Mevleviyya, founded by Jalaluddin Rumi and his followers in Konya, a major city in central Turkey. Rumi's encounter with his teacher, Shams of Tabriz, turned him from a scholar into a lover, a metamorphosis that ignited centuries of poetic mysticism. Rumi's Mathnawi, a 6-volume ocean of allegory, has been called the Quran in Persian. It explores unity, separation, death, and divine love in a language of light and motion. From his inspiration came the whirling Sema ceremony, in which movement becomes meditation. The body itself becomes a symbolic axis, turning between heaven and earth. The rotation evokes celestial motion, recalling the movements of the planets and stars, aligning human consciousness with cosmic order. A dervish is a member of a Muslim Sufi ascetic fraternity, often known for taking vows of poverty and practicing ecstatic rituals like whirling or dancing to attain spiritual union. Their movement reflects a timeless truth, that ecstasy arises not through escape from the world, but through rhythmic harmony with its pulse. The breath itself becomes a sacrament. Hu, the divine pronoun for he, marks both inhalation and exhalation, echoing the ineffable presence in every moment, similar to the tetragrammaton in Kabbalistic practice. Within the Sufi cosmology, the universe is a mirror reflecting the attributes of God, similar to the concept of Adam Kadmon as a cosmic manifestation of the tree of life in Kabbalah, reflected within the practitioner or Adam. Ibn Arabi, the great Andalusian mystic, described this as Wahdat al-wujud, the unity of being. Every existent thing, he taught, is a locus of divine manifestation and a reflection of the one through the many. In its first few centuries, Sufism moved from austerity to ecstasy, from solitude into community, from the fire of devotion into the light of metaphysics. Yet, as its poetry and practices spread beyond the Islamic world, something even deeper took shape: the realization that mysticism itself might be a universal language. By the 12th and 13th centuries CE, Sufism had matured into an expansive intellectual and mystical tradition. It was no longer confined to monasteries or ascetic retreats. It became a vast ocean of literature, art, and metaphysical speculation. The Sufi way, once marked by renunciation, began to radiate outward through the works of poets, philosophers, and visionaries who spoke the language of the soul. In Persia, the poetic current crystallized through figures such as Sana'i, Attar, and Rumi. Sana'i's Garden of Truth, from 1131 CE, introduced love as a metaphysical principle, while Attar's Conference of the Birds, from 1177 CE, mapped the entire mystical journey through allegory. Sana'i's book, The Garden of Truth, a treatise on God and the seeker's journey to him, forms one part of three highly influential early Sufi works, the others being Attar's Conference of the Birds and Rumi's Masnavi or Mathnavi. In Attar's tale, thousands of birds set out to find their king, the Simurgh, a mythical being whose name in Persian means both 30 birds and divine bird. After crossing 7 valleys, quest, love, knowledge, detachment, unity, bewilderment, and annihilation, only 30 birds remain. When they finally reach the throne of the Simurgh, they realize that they themselves are the one they sought. The allegory encapsulates Sufism's central paradox. The seeker and the sought are not separate. Awakening is the unveiling of what has always been. The same realization echoed through Rumi's verses. His Masnavi and Divani Shamsi Tabrizi became the living scripture of love mysticism. For Rumi, separation was the veil through which love reveals unity. His famous metaphors, like fire for longing, wine for ecstasy, and the reed for the soul's cry, each encode layers of esoteric meaning. The reed flute lamenting its severance from the reed bed mirrors the soul's yearning for its divine source. Like the hermetic divine spark trapped in matter, the soul's music is its remembrance of the beloved. Around the same time in Andalusia, Muhammad ibn al-Arabi, often called al-Shaykh al-Akbar, or the greatest master, synthesized Sufi symbolism into an intricate metaphysical system. His Fusus al-Hikam and Meccan Revelations describe the universe as a continuous unfolding of divine self-disclosure, or tajalli. Every form, he argued, is a mirror reflecting an aspect of the absolute. Ibn Arabi's doctrine of Wahdat al-wujud, the unity of being, became one of the most sophisticated statements of monistic mysticism in Islamic thought, resonating with the Hindu notion of non-duality called Advaita Vedanta, the Taoist concept of the Tao, and the Neoplatonic One. He even uses the language of imagination, called khayal, to describe the intermediary realm between spirit and matter, akin to the Hermetic astral plane or the Tibetan bardo, a world shaped by the creative power of consciousness itself. In the East, Sufism found fertile ground in Central and South Asia. The Persian poet and scholar al-Ghazali, a century before Rumi, had already bridged theology and mysticism. Once a scholar imprisoned by rational doubt, he underwent a personal crisis leading to a profound inner awakening. His writings, particularly the revival of the religious sciences, translated Sufism into a universal psychology of spiritual experience. Through him, Sufism entered into the heart of Sunni orthodoxy while still maintaining the depth of direct experience. If Ibn Arabi articulated the cosmology of divine love, al-Ghazali provided its ethics and method. Through these cross-currents, Sufism became more than a mystical branch of Islam. It became a universal map of the soul's evolution, expressed through love, light, and remembrance. And yet, for the Sufis, all of this knowledge meant nothing without experience, without the presence of a living master, and the transformative power of practice. In Sufi tradition, the seeker, called a murid, cannot travel the path alone. The guidance of a shaykh or pir is essential. A shaykh generally implies a scholarly leader or elder, while pir specifically denotes a Sufi master or saint. The master serves as both exemplar and mirror, reflecting divine qualities the disciple has yet to awaken. This relationship resonates with the guru-disciple dynamic in Hinduism, the lama-student bond in Tibetan Buddhism, or the shaman-apprentice relationship in entheogenic experience. The Tariqa thus functions as a living alchemical vessel, an inner crucible where teachings, practices, and human relationships become the means of transmutation. The Tariqa was typically guided by a master known as a murshid, whose authority derived not from institutional power but from realized knowledge. A shaykh is a broad term for a learned spiritual leader or teacher in Islam, while a murshid is a specific type of guide within Sufism who leads disciples through the spiritual path. While often used interchangeably, Pir typically implies an elder or head of a lineage, while Murshid emphasizes the role of teacher and guide. What makes this period remarkable is how seamlessly the Sufis wove together philosophy, poetry, and practice. Their language was symbolic yet precise, a mysticism of both the heart and the intellect. Through them, Sufism became a mirror, reflecting the great mystical impulse that pulses through all faiths. Ritual practices developed to facilitate transformation. Among the most well-known is Dhikr, the remembrance of the divine name of God, involving repetition of divine names, phrases, or invocations. The Sufi Dhikr remains the heart of the practice across all orders. Whether whispered in solitude or chanted in unison, this reverberation of Allah, Allah, Allah transforms the seeker's consciousness through vibration. In many ways, it parallels the Hindu japa, or the Buddhist mantra, a psychoacoustic gateway to altered states where language dissolves into energy. This practice may be silent or vocal, individual or communal. In certain orders, it takes on rhythmic and even musical forms, inducing altered states of awareness. The repetition functions not only as devotion, but as a method of cognitive restructuring, gradually displacing ordinary patterns of thought with a constant awareness of the divine. Another practice, samā, involves listening, often to music or poetry, as a means of spiritual elevation. Through fasting, vigils, silence, poetry, and rhythm, the Sufi slowly polishes the qalb, or the heart. Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari described the heart as a mirror, tarnished by ego, yet capable of reflecting divine light when purified. The ritual of Dhikr, the poetry of longing, the dance of the dervish, each is a stroke of that polishing cloth. When the mirror becomes clear, the mystic perceives the divine as both immanent and transcendent, perceived not through intellect but through direct illumination, or kashf. This unveiling carries a distinctly psychedelic or entheogenic quality, not in external stimulation but internal chemistry. Al-Junayd compared the mystic's experience to intoxication, saying, "Our way is the path of sobriety within intoxication." The Sufi does not lose the self in chaos, they dissolve into order too vast for language. This balance between ecstasis and fanā echoes the controlled rapture of the Eleusinian mysteries, or the meditative samadhi of yogic practice. Across time, Sufism would adapt to countless cultures, absorbing local idioms while preserving the inner essence of divine love. In North Africa, it took on the rhythms of Berber chants. In Persia, it flowered into poetry. In Turkey, it became music. In India, it became movement and song. Always, the heart remains central, the chamber where man meets God and God meets man. Yet, even as Sufism embraces all, it remains anchored in the remembrance of God, the Dhikr that transforms every breath into a flame of devotion. Its universalism does not erase Sufism's Islamic root. Rather, it reveals the esoteric depth of Islam, called al-Ihsan, which is the inner excellence of seeing God in all things. At the core of Sufi aesthetics lies the interplay between light and love. Light symbolizes divine knowledge, called Nur Muhammadi, the primordial luminosity from which all creation unfolds. This motif draws upon the Quranic Ayat an-Nur, meaning Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. Philosophers like Suhrawardi built entire systems on this vision, describing reality as a cascading hierarchy of illumination. The purified heart is a lamp, the soul its glass, and divine presence the flame. When this illumination dawns, the world itself becomes transparent, a prism refracting the infinite spectrum of the One. Yet alongside this mysticism runs an equally potent symbolism, that of wine. Though Islam forbids literal intoxication, Sufi poetry transformed the cup, the tavern, and the wine into metaphors for the ecstasy of union. The wine is divine love, the cup is the heart, the tavern is the soul's emptiness. Early Sufis borrowed the language of love and intoxication to describe spiritual experience. In Persian and later in Turkish and Urdu poetry, the beloved became a symbol of the ineffable divine. To taste God was to drink from the cup of annihilation, echoing the Dionysian and Vedic notions of entheogenesis, the transformative intoxication through which consciousness dissolves its boundaries. In this sense, Sufism carries a deep entheogenic sensibility, the cosmos as a living sacrament, and the self as a vessel for divine inebriation, without necessarily requiring an external substance. In the ecstatic utterances of poets like Hafiz and Omar Khayyam, this metaphor becomes vividly alive. The lover, drunk on the vintage of divine beauty, transcends moral boundaries and returns to the innocence of pure being. Here, the act of drinking serves the same function as the entheogenic sacraments of other spiritual systems. It dissolves separateness, floods perception with wonder, and unveils the world as a radiant manifestation of divinity. One may consider the Dionysian rites of Greece, the chanting traditions of Vedic India, or the entheogenic ceremonies of indigenous cultures, where substances or techniques serve to dissolve ordinary perception and reveal underlying unity. Historically, certain antinomian or nonconformist Sufi dervish communities in Syria, Egypt, and Anatolia utilized cannabis or hashish as an adjunct to meditation and to induce spiritual intoxication called kef, though this was rarely sanctioned by mainstream Sufism. In the 12th through 14th centuries CE, Sufi devotees used cannabis to enhance social bonding, stimulate intellectual and meditative states, and deepen devotional experiences. These practices, sometimes considered celestial botany, were thought to aid in reaching states of fanā or annihilation of the self. While Sufism does not traditionally employ entheogenic sacraments as a central feature, its literature is replete with symbolic language that parallels such experiences. The frequent references to wine, intoxication, and the beloved are not merely poetic devices, but encode states of consciousness that transcend ordinary cognition. In the works of poets such as Rumi, Hafiz, and Attar, intoxication becomes a metaphor for divine absorption. The wine is not of the vine, but of the spirit. This symbolic intoxication aligns with the broader patterns observed in mystical systems. In the Eleusinian mysteries, initiates partook of a sacrament called kykeon, believed by some scholars to contain psychoactive properties. In the Vedic Soma ritual, a sacred drink facilitated communion with the gods. In Mesoamerican traditions, plants such as psilocybin mushrooms serve as vehicles for divine encounter. While Sufism internalizes this process, relying on disciplined practice rather than external substances, the experiential goal remains analogous: a dissolution of the boundary between self and ultimate reality. Behind these symbols lies the inner architecture of Sufi gnosis. The self, called nafs or nafs, must be disciplined, refined, and ultimately surrendered. Sufi psychology describes multiple levels of the nafs, from the nafs al-amara, or the commanding soul driven by desire, to the nafs al-mutma'ina, or the tranquil soul. Each stage corresponds to a deeper unveiling of divine reality. This process of refinement, called taskiya al-nafs, echoes alchemical symbolism with the purification of lead into gold, or the transformation of the base ego into the luminous heart. The qalb or heart, ruh or spirit, and sir or mystery together form the subtle anatomy of the human being, akin to the chakras or subtle bodies in other esoteric systems. These stages of transformation gave rise to a whole language of initiation. But Sufism, unlike many mystical schools, did not isolate itself from the world. It lived among people, through music, storytelling, and the beauty of ordinary life made sacred. Sufism, while firmly situated within Islamic theology, operates through symbolic and experiential frameworks that mirror those found in other esoteric spiritual systems. The use of sound, rhythm, breath, and movement to induce altered states suggests a continuity with ancient initiatory practices. Each dervish spins around his heart, his right hand extended upward to receive divine grace, left hand turned downward to distribute it to the world. The entire ceremony is mathematical, cosmological, and poetic. Each movement corresponds to a stage in creation, from the descent into form to the return into unity. In this, the Sema parallels the meditative dances of the Bun and Vajrayana traditions, or the sacred circle dances of Siberian and Native American tribes, all expressing alignment between human rhythm and cosmic order. The Qawwali of the Chishti order carries this same energy through sound. Originating in 13th century India, these devotional assemblies blend Arabic, Persian, and Indic musical traditions into layered ascending crescendos of praise. Voices, drums, and harmoniums merge in repetitive intensity until consciousness itself begins to dissolve in rhythm. The word sama, meaning listening, signifies more than hearing. It is a contemplative act through which divine presence is perceived through vibration. The heart becomes a resonant chamber for divine remembrance, echoing the Hindu bhajan, the Christian glossolalia, and the shamanic drum trance. This embodied spirituality reveals Sufism's kinship with the entheogenic spirit, awakening not through dogma but through direct experience, through transformation of perception. As Sufi orders spread, they became centers of art, education, and social reform. Yet, even amid political rise and occasional persecution, their central message remained constant, that every path, every form, returns to the same ineffable source. Thinkers of the Renaissance who encountered Arabic texts through Spain were influenced by Sufi metaphysics, particularly the Neoplatonic streams within Ibn Arabi's thought, and Suhrawardi's illuminationism, called Hikmat al-Ishraq. By the 15th and 16th century CE, Sufism's reach stretched from North Africa to Indonesia. In the Maghreb, the Shadili order emphasized balance between contemplation and service, being in the marketplace but not of it. In Sudan and West Africa, Sufi lodges became sanctuaries of literacy and resistance against colonial oppression. In the Ottoman Empire, mystical brotherhoods deeply influenced architecture, calligraphy, and statecraft. The mosque became a mandala, and the script itself a geometric meditation. In India, the Naqshbandi and Chishti orders cultivated a synthesis of Islam and Hindu philosophy. Saints like Nizamuddin Auliya and Amir Khusro spread teachings of tolerance, unity, and beauty. Their shrines became melting pots of faith, visited by Muslims and Hindus alike, where music became the universal language of divine remembrance. This syncretic energy laid spiritual groundwork that would later echo in the emergence of Sikhism, a path that, like Sufism, sought unity beyond religious identity through devotion and remembrance of the One. Meanwhile, in Persia and Central Asia, Sufism merged with illuminationist philosophy, producing thinkers like Mullah Sadra, who saw existence itself as an ever-deepening journey toward God. This philosophical Sufism would later shape Islamic thought up to the modern day, influencing not only Muslim philosophers, but also European Orientalists, Theosophists, and later esoteric interpreters, who found in Sufi language a profound metaphysics of consciousness. By the dawn of the modern era, Sufism had become a web connecting continents and conceptions of the sacred. But in the centuries to come, it would face new challenges, namely colonialism, reform, and the disenchanted rationalism of the modern world. And yet, even through these transformations, its message would not fade, but evolve. As the centuries turned and the world entered the age of reason and empire, Sufism confronted a profound transformation. The colonial encounter in the Muslim world fractured traditional structures, while reformist movements sought to purify Islam of what they saw as innovations. The ecstatic chants, the music, the poetry, many of which had carried the faith's heart for over 1,000 years, were suddenly questioned or suppressed. Yet Sufism endured not as an institution, but as a current of consciousness, one that slips through the cracks of history, surfacing wherever the longing for God takes form. As translations of Sufi poetry spread across Europe in the 19th century, they fueled the Romantic imagination. Goethe's West Östlicher Divan drew inspiration from Hafiz. Emerson and Thoreau absorbed Sufi ideals of divine eminence through Persian verse. And later, the beat poets and mystics of the 1960s, including Ginsberg, Snyder, and Leary, found in Rumi's language of ecstatic annihilation a blueprint for psychedelic transcendence. The mystical bridge between East and West, once faint, now glowed with recognition. Beyond literature, Sufism informed Western esoteric orders seeking experiential religion. The Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and later Theosophical circles, all encountered translated Sufi metaphysics through Ibn Arabi and Suhrawardi. Theosophy's ideas of planes of consciousness parallel Sufi conceptions of Malakut, Jabarut, and Lahut, the ascending realms of being through which the seeker journeys back to the source. Even early depth psychology absorbed echoes of this cosmology, as Jung described individuation as the reconciliation of opposites, akin to Ibn Arabi's doctrine of unity within multiplicity. Yet, even as Sufism inspired poets and psychologists alike, its essence remained unchanged. The path was never about philosophy, it was about remembrance. Every breath still calls the seeker back to the One. In the 19th and 20th centuries CE, travelers, poets, and seekers in Europe and America encountered translations of Rumi, Hafiz, and Ibn Arabi. Scholars like Sir John Malcolm, Reynold Nicholson, and later Henry Corbin illuminated the depth of Islamic mysticism to Western audiences. Corbin's translations of Suhrawardi's philosophy of illumination and his studies on Ibn Arabi opened bridges between Sufi cosmology and Western esotericism, Hermeticism, and Christian mysticism. For Corbin, Sufism was the imaginal world made visible, a realm where matter and spirit meet through the alchemy of perception. Around the same time, new Sufi teachers began carrying the spiritual system to the West. Hazrat Inayat Khan, from the Chishti lineage, arrived in Europe in 1910 with a transformative message. The God of each is the God of all. He taught the universality of the Sufi path beyond religious boundaries, weaving it into the Western search for self-realization and beauty. His Sufi Order International brought the themes of love, harmony, and beauty into conversation with music, psychology, and philosophy, mirroring how the Chishti masters once integrated Indian and Islamic mysticism centuries before. It's here in the bridge between mysticism and modernity that Sufism found kinship with the global entheogenic revival, those who saw it not escape, but union through expanded consciousness. While classical Sufism did not emphasize plant sacraments, its experiential language harmonizes deeply with entheogenic exploration, intoxication as metaphysical unveiling, the heart as an instrument of perception, and the annihilation of self in the ocean of oneness. In the 20th century, thinkers like Alan Watts, Houston Smith, and Terence McKenna found in the Sufi vocabulary of ecstatic unity a mirror of the psychedelic vision. The Sufis' wine and cup became metaphors for the same dissolution that entheogens induced, a consciousness flooded with divine presence, where identity gives way to awe. Within some oral traditions of Central Asia, faint echoes of Zoroastrian Hauma-like rituals or the use of intoxicating sacraments for spiritual purpose persist, though most historical Sufism practiced inner intoxication, using rhythmic breath, chanting, and music to reach altered states naturally. The point was not the cup's contents, but the state of remembrance it kindled. In the Sama ceremony, the music becomes the sacrament. In silent Dhikr, the breath becomes the vine. And in the silence of the heart, ecstasy ripens without external catalyst. This is entheogenesis in its truest sense, God born within. Sufism's entheogenic resonance extends also to its cosmology of vibration and energy. The concept of Sir, the innermost mystery within the heart, is described as a subtle light or resonance linking human and divine. In psychological or psychedelic terms, this could be seen as the clear light experience or direct unity consciousness. The symbols of light, wine, and annihilation serve as ancient templates for understanding states that transcend linguistic duality. Rumi's verse, "The lamps are different, but the light is the same," whenever recited in the right resonance, does more than describe unity, it transmits it. Behind this language of ecstasy lies a disciplined path, a way not of escaping the world, but of awakening to the sacred that saturates it. The Sufi does not flee from creation, but sees creation as God's self-revelation, shimmering in every form. Central to Sufi practice is presence, called huzur, the constant awareness of the divine in each breath. Daily acts, when performed with remembrance, transform into worship. Eating, speaking, loving, and even breathing become mirrors of the infinite. The phrase La ilaha illa Allah, meaning there is no reality but the real, is not a theological proposition, it is a declaration of direct perception. In that recognition, the world as an object dissolves, and only the divine subject remains. Mystical practice thus becomes continuous entheogenesis, the constant birth of divine awareness within the human heart. This philosophy has profound resonance with the inner alchemies of Taoism and the non-dual awareness of Dzogchen meditation. In each, consciousness itself is the philosopher's stone, transforming the mundane into the sacred by the brilliance of awareness. In this light, the Sufi practice of remembrance harmonizes with the Buddhist cultivation of mindfulness and the Gnostic search for gnosis, both seeking not external salvation, but inner awakening. The Sufi orders preserve this embodied gnosis through art and architecture. Calligraphy was not mere ornamentation, it was geometry as revelation, echoing divine proportions akin to the Hermetic sacred geometry of the West. Sufi and Islamic calligraphers, called khattats, historically collected the shavings from their reed pens, called kalam, throughout their lives. This practice, rooted in profound spiritual respect for the sacred words being written, symbolizes that the pen's lifetime of service should not be discarded carelessly. Sufi architects, especially in Persia and Mughal India, built mosques and tombs as metaphysical resonators, domes reflecting the vault of heaven, symmetry expressing unity, and arabesque patterns conveying the infinity of divine manifestation. The shrine of Shah Nematullah Vali in Persia, or the Dargah of Nizamuddin in Delhi, stand as enduring diagrams of the cosmos. These sacred forms, whether poetic, musical, or architectural, carry the vibration of unity, and it is through this universal vibration that Sufism quietly permeated nearly every culture it touched, even when its name wasn't spoken. In the modern age, Sufism transcended its historical boundaries. It began speaking not only to Muslims, but to seekers of every path, offering an inner science of consciousness adaptable to new languages and cultures. The 20th century saw Sufism translated into psychological and philosophical terms. Figures like Idris Shah introduced Sufi stories and teaching parables to Western readers, emphasizing their resonance with Jungian psychology and Zen-like paradox. Through stories of tricksters like Mullah Nasruddin, Shah suggested that Sufism functioned not through dogma, but through a living pedagogy of insight, a wisdom that dismantles the ego through humor and paradox. Meanwhile, the writings of Henri Corbin and Fritjof Schuon, and later Syed Hossein Nasr, connected Sufism to the larger perennial philosophy, the idea that beneath all faiths beats a single metaphysical heart. For Corbin, it disclosed an imaginal realm, the mundus imaginalis, wherein symbolic vision mediates between the sensible and the intelligible. For Schuon, the Sufi doctrine of unity mirrored the Advaitic realization of the one without a second. For Nasr, Sufi metaphysics represented the sacred science of being itself, a remedy for the disenchanted world increasingly divorced from its spiritual roots. The meeting of Sufism and psychology, especially through Jungian and transpersonal perspectives, revealed new layers of meaning in classic Sufi terms. The nafs, ruh, and qalb began to be read as symbolic stages of consciousness. Fanā, or annihilation, became reinterpreted as ego death. Baqā, or subsistence, as integration or rebirth. Modern mystics and therapists found in Sufi maps of the soul a phenomenology of transformation, remarkably aligned with inner alchemy and even the psychedelic states explored in the late 20th century. Today, Sufi communities flourish around the world, from the dargahs of Pakistan to the retreat centers of California. The mystical circles of remembrance continue, the murid gatherings around the sheikh, the echo of chanting filling the night air, the silent vibration that lingers long after the sound fades. In each heart that whispers Allah, the same revelation awakens anew. The beloved has always been here, closer than we may have been aware. In modern entheogenic exploration, the insights of Sufism, ego dissolution, illumination, and unity, serve as interpretive keys. The journey mapped by the Sufis, where the self dives into the ocean of being and returns transformed, parallels the archetypal psychedelic journey. But the Sufi way insists, this dissolution must blossom into service, compassion, and beauty. For to return from fanā into baqā is not to escape from worldly responsibility, but to love it as the face of God. As the mystics say, the Sufi is not one who sees God, but one who sees only God. That vision, at once transcendent and intimate, remains one of humanity's greatest revelations. As we move into the present moment, Sufism continues, not as a relic of history, but as a timeless current flowing beneath the surface of the human quest. Whether in Morocco or Malaysia, London or Los Angeles, the Sufi way endures wherever there are hearts capable of love and ears tuned to silence. Mosques, shrines, circles of Dhikr, and online gatherings convene around the same invisible axis of remembrance. For Sufism is not an ideology, it is a transformation of consciousness, a perpetual migration from self to source. In the shrines of Lahore and Ajmer, the air still trembles with qawwali. Candles flicker before the tombs of saints, their walls etched with calligraphy declaring Hu, the divine breath. Across continents, new generations of seekers translate ancient Arabic and Persian verses, not as history lessons, but as living transmissions. In university seminars, in art installations, even in electronic music and contemporary poetry, the pulse of unity resurfaces. The mystic's torch passes endlessly from the desert saints of Basra to the modern traveler, who, headphones on, meditates to the same rhythm of divine remembrance. This endurance is not accidental. The Sufi view of history is circular, not linear. Every age, no matter how dark, hides its saints, called awliya Allah, or the friends of God, whose silent presence sustains the world's harmony, like acupuncture points along the invisible body of earth. This notion aligns with the Buddhist bodhisattva ideal, the Taoist immortal called a Xian, and the hidden masters of Western esoteric thought. Each culture speaks of awakened ones who, unseen, maintain cosmic equilibrium. For Sufism, these saints are embodiments of love, radiating the divine qualities of mercy, beauty, and wisdom through their presence alone. To understand Sufism's survival is to recognize its essence, fluid, adaptable, and always alive. It speaks every language it encounters, yet it remains the same song of union. Through centuries of change, Sufism maintained that truth is singular, though paths may differ. The famous Sufi maxim, "There are as many paths to God as there are breaths of living beings," reveals its pluralistic spirit. For the Sufi, diversity is not contradiction, but divine artistry, the infinite facets of the one jewel. When the Chishti saints embraced Hindu devotees, or when Rumi wrote that religions were but different lamps lit by the same light. They were expressing this metaphysical inclusivity. Reality, they taught, is one, but it delights in appearing as many. This inclusivity became a lifeline in the modern era, where dogmatic divides and identity conflicts scarred religious landscapes worldwide. Figures like Bawa Muhyiddin, Pir Vilayat Inayat Khan, and Llewellyn Vaughan Lee carried forward a vision of Sufism as the heartbeat of world spirituality. They spoke of being drunk on the wine of existence, of awakening through love rather than belief. Toward the One is a foundational 1974 book by Pir Vilayat Inayat Khan, who lived 1916 to 2004, head of the Sufi order in the West and son of its founder Hazrat Inayat Khan, exploring meditation, mysticism, and spiritual practice. It blends Eastern Sufi practices with Western psychology to help individuals attain enlightenment and overcome self-limiting, rigid self-images, covering topics like aura, inner space, and the perfection of love and harmony. For many contemporary seekers, these teachers offered not conversion but remembrance, a reorientation toward that inner divinity common to all. In the global interspiritual movement of the 21st century, Sufism resonates profoundly with other wisdom traditions. Its language of direct experience parallels the mindfulness of Buddhism, the non-dual awareness of Advaita in Hinduism, and the contemplative silence of Christian mysticism. In Sufi gatherings today, one might hear the words of Meister Eckhart beside Rumi, or Lao Tzu beside Ibn Arabi, all meeting in the silence between worlds. This blending is not dilution, it is fulfillment. For the Sufi knows the truth cannot be contained by one form, it must pour through every vessel. Through this vision, Sufism becomes not just a religion, but a psychology of illumination, a map for the evolution of human consciousness. And through the centuries, this wisdom has quietly informed countless seekers outside its name. Modern spirituality owes much to the invisible streams of Sufi influence. The mindfulness movements echo Sufi awareness, depth psychology mirrors the tazkiyah of the self, and sacred music and dance draw from its ecstatic practices. Even the language of vibration, frequency, and energetic resonance that pervades New Age spirituality finds subtle ancestry in Sufi cosmology, where Dhikr and samā were understood as invocations that transform the energetic body and awaken latent perception. In the academic world, Sufism continues to reshape understandings of soul and self. Scholars such as William Chittick, Sachiko Murata, and Karl Ernst explore how Sufi metaphysics redefine human identity, not as a discrete ego, but as a mirror within which the divine contemplates itself. In that reflection, spirituality and philosophy converge. Our awareness is the meeting point of time and eternity. For artists, Sufism remains inexhaustible inspiration. Musicians like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and Abida Parveen brought its devotional power to international stages, their voices transporting audiences into states of collective transcendence. Their performances became modern samā, inviting even those unfamiliar with Islam to taste the universal intoxication of love. In the West, visual artists and poets use Sufi imagery, moth and flame, sea and drop, lover and beloved, to express the ineffable. The cultural forms may change, the essence remains. Longing and union, the eternal dance of the soul toward its source. And perhaps this is Sufism's most enduring gift, its universality without compromise, its adaptability without loss of essence. While the world fractures into identities, the Sufi whispers, only love is real. The Sufi flying heart or winged heart symbol represents the human heart liberated and ascending toward the divine, symbolizing the spirit's journey to God. It represents a heart with wings, connecting soul and matter, often interpreted as the liberating power of divine love. the mystics teach that the human heart is the throne of God, the axis where heaven and earth converse. The prophet said, "The heart of the believer is the house of God." In this teaching lies the culmination of the Sufi path, the realization that the beloved we seek in every form, in every ritual, in every galaxy, already resides within. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm, the droplet reflects the infinite sea. Rumi writes, "You are not a drop in the ocean, but the entire ocean in one drop." To polish the heart is to unveil the cosmos, radiant and unbounded. Ibn Arabi writes, "God is the mirror in which humans see themselves, and humans are the mirror in which he beholds his own names." Thus, the journey of a Sufi, through longing, dissolution, and remembrance, is the universe's own journey towards self-awareness. What we call enlightenment, he wrote, is the awakening of God in the mirror of the heart. Here, Sufism expands beyond religion or philosophy into sheer metaphysical poetry, the revelation that being itself is love recognizing itself. In this realization, the world becomes transparent. Every face, every sound, every leaf trembling in the wind becomes a verse of the eternal poem. Ecstasy no longer requires trance, desert, or monastery. It arises in the simple now. The mystic's entire life becomes Dhikr, and Dhikr becomes the heartbeat of existence. This is the summit where theology ends and experience begins, where lover and beloved meet in silence. Across continents and centuries, Sufism has remained one of humanity's deepest explorations of love's mysteries, an inner alchemy that dissolves separation and transforms perception. It calls not for belief, but for presence. Today, that call resounds louder than ever. In an age of noise, the Sufi reminds us to listen, to the pulse behind all things. In an era of division, the mystic reminds us to love, to see one light through 1,000 forms. And in a time defined by acceleration and distraction, the ancient practice of remembrance invites us to return to stillness, to the silence from which creation all flows. The path is open to all who long to know the real, for the secret has never changed. The world you seek is within you. The journey of Sufism, of divine love and remembrance, brings us to the threshold of another chapter in the soul's unfolding. For in the plains of Punjab and the hymns of devotion sung in the language of the heart, a new synthesis emerged, the birth of Sikhism. In our next video, join us as we explore Sikhism, the spiritual revolution born in 15th century India that wove together Sufi mysticism and Bhakti devotion into a new vision of divine unity. We'll trace how Guru Nanak's revelation echoed the Sufi cry of oneness, how song and service became sacraments, and how remembrance, called Nam, bridges the human and divine in a living tradition that still thrives today. Join us next time as we move from the poetry of Sufi love to the hymns of Sikhism, a 15th century monotheistic religion founded by Guru Nanak in the Punjab region, focusing on equality, selfless service, and meditating on one God. Where will this journey take us after Sikhism? Like and subscribe to find out. Thank you for watching. Find more at joinseek.org.